The Ecuadorian government limits Galapagos cruise vessels to strict passenger caps, controlled routes, and regulated landing sites. And that bureaucratic stranglehold is exactly why your experience there will be unlike anything else you've ever paid for. Let's start with the question I get asked most often. Why cruise instead of staying on land? Here's the honest answer. The Galapagos archipelago is spread across roughly 45,000 square miles of Pacific Ocean, and the most extraordinary wildlife encounters happen on islands that are simply too remote for day trips. When you base yourself on a cruise ship or expedition vessel, you wake up each morning already at your destination. No early morning ferry, no racing the crowds, no wasted hours in transit. You step off the boat and you are immediately in one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. Land-based tourism has improved dramatically in recent years, but if you have the budget and the time, a cruise remains the gold standard Galapagos experience. Now let's talk about the types of vessels, because this decision will shape your entire trip. You have three main categories to consider. First, large cruise ships carrying anywhere from 90 to 100 passengers. These offer more amenities, greater stability on rough water crossings, and typically lower per-person costs. Second, mid-size vessels in the 16 to 48 passenger range. These hit a sweet spot between comfort and intimacy, and they can access some anchorages that larger ships cannot. Third, small luxury yachts carrying fewer than 20 passengers. These provide the most personalized experience, the best naturalist guides, and the closest feeling of actually exploring rather than touring. My personal recommendation for 2026 is to aim for that mid-size category if your budget allows it. You get meaningful wildlife access without sacrificing a comfortable bed and a decent shower after a morning of snorkeling. Speaking of budget, let's get into the numbers because I believe in being completely transparent with you. In 2026, a Galapagos cruise will typically run between $3,500 and $5,500 per person for a week-long itinerary on a mid-range vessel. Luxury expedition ships can push that figure to $8,000 or even $12,000 per person. That sounds steep, and it genuinely is a significant investment. But here's what those costs include. Nearly all meals, guided excursions, national park fees, and in many cases, your snorkeling equipment. What you're paying for is also the strict regulation that protects this ecosystem. The Ecuadorian government limits the number of visitors who can access each site, controls which vessels operate in the national park, and requires certified naturalist guides on every single excursion. That infrastructure costs money, and it's why the Galapagos still looks the way Darwin found it 200 years ago. Now let's talk about timing, because when you go matters enormously in the Galapagos. The archipelago sits right on the equator, so there's no dramatic four-season cycle the way you'd experience in temperate destinations. Instead, you have two main seasons. The warm season runs roughly from December through May. During this period, water temperatures rise, the seas are generally calmer, and you'll see dramatic green vegetation on the islands after rainfall. This is baby season, which means tortoise hatchlings, sea lion pups, and some of the most photogenic wildlife moments imaginable. The cooler, dry season runs from June through November. Water temperatures drop, currents strengthen, and marine wildlife activity absolutely explodes. This is when whale sharks cruise through the northern islands, when penguins are at their most active, and when underwater visibility for snorkeling and diving is at its peak. Both seasons are genuinely spectacular. The warm season is better for families and photographers focused on land-based wildlife. The cool season is the choice for serious divers and anyone prioritizing marine encounters. Let's get into the islands themselves, because not all itineraries are created equal. There are 13 major islands in the archipelago and dozens of smaller islets, and no single cruise visits them all. When comparing itineraries, look specifically for these essential stops. Santa Cruz is often your point of arrival and home to the Charles Darwin Research Station, where you can observe Galapagos giant tortoises up close and learn about the ongoing conservation work. Isabela is the largest island in the chain and arguably the most dramatic, featuring a cluster of active shield volcanoes and one of the few places on Earth where you can snorkel with penguins right on the equator. Fernandina is a younger, more volcanically active island, and the site of some of the densest marine iguana colonies anywhere in the archipelago. Espanola, in the far southeast, hosts the world's only breeding colony of waved albatross and some of the most stunning cliff scenery you'll ever witness. North Seymour is a small island north of Santa Cruz, but absolutely packed with wildlife, including frigate birds in full breeding display and blue-footed boobies performing their famously ridiculous mating dance. If an itinerary checks 4 or 5 of these islands, you're looking at a solid experience. One thing I want to address directly because it causes so much confusion. What's the difference between a Western itinerary and a Central or Eastern route? Western itineraries typically cover Isabela and Fernandina, which are more volcanically active, more remote, and widely considered the most pristine environments in the Galapagos. Eastern and Central itineraries cover the populated islands and tend to be less expensive and easier to access. Many operators offer figure-8 routes that combine both regions over 8 days, and if you can swing 8 days over 7, take it. That extra day makes an enormous difference in what you can see. Now let's talk about something the brochures don't always mention. Motion sickness is real in the Galapagos, especially during the inter-island crossings on the cool season. I'll be honest, some of those night passages can get rough. Pack medication, wear C-bands, and talk to your doctor before you go. It doesn't ruin the experience, but being unprepared is the fastest way to spend a beautiful morning below deck, feeling miserable when you should be watching sea lions play in the surf. Before you book anything, there's a 2026 specific consideration you need to be aware of. The Galapagos National Park has continued tightening visitor regulations in recent years to address the growing pressure of tourism on this fragile ecosystem. Make sure any operator you choose is fully licensed by the park authority and that their naturalist guides hold official certification. An unlicensed operator is not just a legal risk for you. It's a genuine threat to the very wildlife you've traveled thousands of miles to see. Check the operator's credentials. Read recent reviews from travelers who completed trips in 2025 or 2026, and book with companies that openly discuss their conservation commitments. Here's my final honest take after years of covering adventure travel. The Galapagos will surprise you in ways no travel content fully prepares you for. The wildlife here has no fear of humans. A Nazca booby will walk directly toward your camera. A marine iguana will sun itself 6 inches from your boot. A giant tortoise will walk past you with the slow confidence of an animal that has existed essentially unchanged for millions of years. That intimacy, that sense that you are a visitor in someone else's world rather than the center of attention, that is what makes this place unlike anywhere else. Plan it carefully. Invest in a quality vessel and certified guides. Time your visit around what matters most to you, and then show up ready to be genuinely humbled by nature at its most extraordinary. If you found this guide useful, subscribe because I'm dropping a full packing list for Galapagos cruises next week. And trust me, what you pack matters more here than almost any other destination on the planet.